Hey, what's up guys? In the following video, because I got so many messages lately, you just asked me how should you treat some sort of Tarrasch variation. And when I asked you, so why do you have problems with Tarrasch? I mean, okay, Tarrasch is quite solid, but they have to deal with IQP on d5, isolated queen pawn. You guys actually got like three mains like this. No, when they take on d4 and play some sort of gambit. I said Schara Gambit. So here, I'm just going to give you Kasparov's approach. First time played by Lajos Port is back to 1956 against Humphrey, famous Hungarian GM. And it's very interesting that Kasparov, ever since he played that variation and the following line that I'm going to present you, for example, this variation was considered to be kind of refuted. But lately, Carlsen and a few other top GMs played it with the black pieces in a little bit new fashion and gave some, like new waves to the line, and it doesn't look, at least, refuted anymore. So I'm just going to show you like Kasparov's way of trading this line. I'll show you the new lines and how Carlsen trades this with the black pieces, and then you're gonna tell me do you like it or not. I just know that ever since I learned the following approach, I won all my games without any problems and beat up this gambit. So let's go. It happens when you play d4 first move, they go d5, you play c4, e6, knight c3, and when they go with c5. When they go with c5, you just take on d5. Normal Tarrasch variation goes with e takes d5, but that's not a subject of this video. So after like c takes d4, you just go queen a4 check. Here, I remember when Ivan Sokolov spoke about this variation and said that some time preparing for some games in Vaikanze many years ago, someone came up with the b5. I checked afterwards and even realized that Lubevich played this b5 move. It's quite interesting, confusing move, for example, for faster time controls. And I'll show you. Those who play b5, you can refute it with knight b5. Now you're threatening knight c7. They go bishop d7, and for example, you have to know e4. It's a very concrete move. Looks like they win the knight back. Any d takes c3, you just develop another piece. If they go with that a6, looks like you're about to lose the knight, but the crucial move is d6. Crucial move is d6, and now you threaten knight c7, and with mate, so they have to take it. You recapture, and when they take the queen, you don't take the knight, but you promote the queen. And that's how you win it. So basically, that's the refutation. If you don't, I don't know, like you watch this video today and then you simply forget about the knight b5 and the refutation, just take on d4 and play an easy chess. So when they go knight c6, you go here, and when they take, don't feel tempted to take any of these weak pawns on b5 and d5, but go with e4. So when they play like d takes e4, you trade the queens off and take on b5. When they play d4, you take on b5 and play knight d5. Point is that they cannot play queen a5, bishop d2, and queen b5 because of knight c7, and by fork you win the queen. So after like queen a4, they go with bishop d7. You take on d4, they take, and you take by queen. When that happens, they have to go with knight c6 to defend on b7. Those who play knight f6, don't feel tempted to go with queen b7, and don't feel tempted to go with queen b3 because of some crazy knight a6, knight c5, which gives black great compensation. No, just bring it back to d1 and play normal line. That's why most of these people will always play knight c6 anyways. You play knight f3, they go knight f6, and we go into the main line. Queen to d1. Here, I know that lately some top GMs went for the queen b3, although I don't want to talk now and discuss why do I think that the queen b3 is more like computerish type of chess and more like one of those, I would say, not that human approach. So I like queen d1, and after bishop c5, let's immediately clear something out. I know that lately is absolutely the best possibility for white is a3, where you just prevent knight b4, securing the place c2 for the queen once they put a rook on the open d-file, and so on and so on. Another thing is when they go queen e7, you just go bishop g5, long castles, e3, bishop f5, and queen a4. And now, simply with these two pawns, you're not allowing to their pieces to simply jump. This knight cannot jump because of this bishop. And they have problems with this pawn, with this position. And it's okay. But I don't want to show you this one. I want to show you the line that became popular thanks to Lajos Portish and Garry Kasparov himself. So after bishop c5, you just go with a3. Yes, you kind of lock the dark square bishop here on c1, but at the same time, you just want to urgently complete your development. So they go queen e7, you go bishop e2, and they go long castle. That's the classic approach. Lately, especially during the 2022, I realized that Magnus Carlsen went for short castle in many of his games there. So when you play castle and they go rook f to d8, I believe it's a little bit better set up with a rook on d8, so another one from a8 to go on c8. Absolutely, I know Ding Liren won a game against Grishchuk with the queen b3, but that's not my suggestion. My suggestion is a3. Once again, securing and safeguarding the b4 square, actually keeping a good control of the c2, so they can never harass your queen on c2 with the knight b4 afterwards. So you just go with a3. After like bishop f5, queen a4, after like, I don't know, knight e5, knight e4, don't exchange it because they want to remove the knight around the king because it's the best defender. So any knight e5, you just go knight e4. Any bishop f5, you just go queen a4. And if they go rook a c8, which is the main move, you just go queen c2. And same approach. If any knight e5, you go knight e4. They can't play bishop f5 any longer. And you just have to complete your development, possibly with bishop d2. Sometimes you want to kick your pawn to b4 and slowly to start activating yourself. Keep in mind your upper pawn. So that would be my approach against this short castle I've been talking about in the beginning of the lesson. So after like bishop e2, most of these guys go with long castles. You go short castles, and typical approach by those guys who play the gambit is g5. And g5, if you face this line for the first time, it really looks critical. It really looks annoying and looks kind of scary. But for you, since you're watching this video and you have a pleasure of being my subscriber and getting all these variations just on a plate and you've got everything, you will know that wing attack should be answered by gaming the center and playing the center, or by another wing attack, especially because we're talking about the opposite side castles. So g5 and Lajos Portish against Humphrey, Hungarian top GM for many years, and the guy who I believe officially played the biggest number of Olympic chess games on the first board, played b4. I very much like this one. He answers in the typical fashion, opposite side castles. So I was just reading Dvoretsky's School of Chess Excellence, and he said, when you have the opposite side castles, don't go for material. Go and be the one who is going to be the first one with the attack. Here, it's the b4 move, and afterwards, Garry Kasparov in his book Opening Revolution of 80s and couple other situations, I wrote that how much he liked this approach with b4. I also like it. You just attack the king, and for example, I learned this one, and whoever plays Schara Gambit against me, I just kill these guys because I know the few tricks. And let me just present you those tricks. After b4, they gotta take. For example, a few days ago, I played online a game against someone with g4. I just jumped with the knight on d4. The guy captured on b4, and I played queen to b3. I'm happy. I want to play rook b1. I want to play knight cb5, a little bit more about knight cb5 a little bit later. And I'm just so much better, and I won the game. Usually, the line goes with knight d4, because they're so much afraid of this knight cb5 or rook b1. I recapture. They can't take because it's going to be with check. And when they play bishop e6, you just play queen b2. you threaten either bishop g5 to pin the knight, or bishop f4, or rook b1 or knight b5, even a3, and white is so much better. Because of that, on b4 they simply, I would say, have to take. g4 brings nothing, but don't fall for this. On g4 you don't take, on c5 you just play knight d4. So that's why they have to take, and you play bishop e2. Looks like with this move you're just completing your development, and not looks like, you do complete your development, opening up the back rank. And for the first time I'm going to teach you some tricks. They have g4 and rook h g8. G4 is the main move, but let's first check. I believe it's a logical thing, but somehow they do not have time for rook h to g8. It's a little bit slow. We can easily play a3, forcing the matters and forcing and clearing the b file for our action. Queen c2 is pretty normal, not allowing bishop f5, knight e4, or anything else. And after king b8, playing knight to d2. You're removing from g4. You want to jump at some point on e4, but more importantly, you just want to control everything. Your up opponent, they don't have attack. It's very important to understand that. White is much better. Because of that, most of these guys should play and will play g4 against you. I have no doubts. You play knight e4, and we have critical position for desperation. It's 15th move, and now they just have to attack you. The attack goes with h5, with rook h g8, or king b8. Most common move in practice is king b8. But let's just say they go all in and they go with h5. For example, unexperienced players who just saw this Schara Gambit in one game, they're just going to push like crazy with h5, h4, g3 and stuff like that. It's very important to show you now the following type of trick, and when you learn it once, you get like 50% of this opening and you won't have problems. It's knight cb5. I very much insist on this idea. You threaten knight takes c6, bishop c6, knight takes a7 with check, taking the bishop, and they absolutely lose the attacking potential. That actually means that I have to play king b8. And even though lately engines prefer rook c1, with some even crazy ideas of not only queen a4 but rook c6. For example, I found a game. The guy played h4, rook c6. Not I found the game. I know this. This is the main idea. I mean, b takes e6, knight a7, queen a4 check, and a beautiful, 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 beautiful move as a part of the refutation. With, I believe it deserves to be brilliant move on chess.com. Knight e6, a fantastic move. Opens up the bishop, gives you bishop e5. They can't take by queen because bishop would be hanging. King is open, and bishop e5 is unstoppable. When they play like this, you just go bishop e5 and go with the rook b1 and mate them when they play bishop d6. Although, after king b8, you can play straightforward. You can take on c6, and you can play queen b3. Watch this out. In this position, you threaten bishop takes f6, followed by queen b4. That's a very important idea behind knight cb5 and queen to b3. So you threaten to take, and afterwards to take the bishop. That's why they play rook h6, bringing the rook on the 6th rank, defending f6, and so many things like this. You just play rook to d1, exchange everything. I found a game where the guy played like this: queen c4, threatening queen f4 to win the rook. Queen b5. Now he won the bishop pair, and he's not up a pawn, but he won the bishop pair. Knight is hanging. Now bishop a3. Nice example of deflection. This would be mate. The guy played knight b6, took here, took on h5, and in position, being up to pawns, black just resigned after bishop e3. Just like you see, after knight d4, simply they do not have time for h5 because of knight cb5. And now you say, okay, but what are we going to do if they play rook hg8? I don't think that they have time for this one either, because we play knight cb5. And when they play king b8, we do the same thing. I once again insist, you threaten knight takes c6, bishop f6, and queen b4. They have to play knight e4, threatening knight e2, and look at this hidden move, rook ab1. There are 5 pieces on the b file, and still the king and the b7 pawn are weak on b8 and b7. How? There is a game. Ivan Faraga, GM from Hungary. His opponent played knight e2, and looks like, look at this. He threatens rook f1, queen b3, rook b1. Black seems to be lost. But then you have knight c6 check, queen b4, baby. Another brilliance. You just take on b4. So when they take on b4, you just say, okay, it's my turn. I'm gonna go with bishop e5. I'm gonna take it. You cannot move it. Once again, because of that beautiful knight on b5. And once again, you send the message. I know for knight cb5. I watch the Maya's channel. You guys have to just resign at this point and say, okay, I'm gonna be a subscriber of this channel as well. This is the way to play chess. So after like queen b4, this guy played knight f3, Farago captured, played bishop e5, took on b4, played first bishop b7, and being up a piece, this guy decided to call it a day. And finally, if they just go with, so they go h5, knight cb5, king b8, instead of that, if they go with the king b8, nothing. Does it change anything? Well, you just watch this lesson and you say, just like we'll solve the problem of the hippo defense where Maya explained us to play f5. Here, knight cb5 is a crucial thing. Let me show you 2 most important games. If knight e5, what happened in the game of Illescas Cordoba, coach and second of Vladimir Kramnik, famous Spanish GM, he went for knight e5. Illescas played queen to b3. Nobody sees anything. Rook h g8, rook ab1. Once again, 5 pieces on the file, and once again, weak b7 and b8. How? The guy played bishop here, and he came up with knight a7. What was the point? When he played this, you cannot go with this because he would give you check. And when you go with this, you cannot go here because of queen a4 mate. And when you go with this, just queen b4. I watched the lesson on that channel. That crazy guy explained us knight cb5, take on e5, and finish them off. So after knight a7, king, knight e4, and Illescas won in a very nice style. He played knight dc6. So look at this. When you play knight c6, he now has knight c6, and after this, he now has queen bishop e5, for example, first. And when you take on e5, queen b4, and the mate is coming in the next move. If king a here, queen a4. If king c7, you just find the mate. I believe queen b8 is enough, queen e5 to win the queen. And finally, if knight cb5 and they just go a6, looks like they're avoiding at least knight a7. You take, watch this out. Rook is threatening the queen, and they threaten the knight. At first glance, during the game, you might think that you have to play knight d4, but then they have enough of attack. I'm not saying enough of attack, but at least they have a compensation. No, that's not a point. You play queen b1. And you once again threaten to take on f6 and to take on b4 with a winning endgame. In one game, I found bishop b5, and if they play a takes b5, you just take here, and look at this. Weak, possibly weak, and above, and way more important than anything else, king on b8 looks weak. Because of that, in the game was rook d6, the guy played a3, the guy brought the bishop back to g3, he now goes and looks for some sort of complications, takes on e3, you're not crazy to take, just solidify yourself, rook e1, solidify yourself, take it, bishop is always better than knight in open positions, plus they have a possibly weak king and a weak pawn on b7, you go queen f5, rook b1, rook c1, played rook c6, rook to e3, and black resigned the game. I believe that this was just a short course and a lecture how to beat up Schara Gambit, and I gave you some very important ideas. Good luck with this, and just have as half success as I used to have against these lines, and you're gonna be very thankful to this crazy coach. Bye bye, guys.